Unbeknownst to me, one brief instant would alter the course of my existence for all time. On a typical Saturday afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow, while a soft breeze whispered through the maple trees in our serene neighborhood. The rich scent of dark coffee enveloped my senses, the heat from the mug seeping into my palm as I rested against the kitchen counter, gazing out the window. The residence at 243 Maplewood Drive exuded an uncommon stillness. My spouse Ben was on the night shift during that period, since my recent promotion to the emergency department. The evenings spent apart from him have turned into a regular occurrence. I delicately swirled my coffee, relishing every sip. A subtle sound drew my focus, a sound so slight it was almost imperceptible. I didn't give it much thought, thinking it was merely Ben's stepson Nathan tinkering with some device in his room. Nathan, at 25, was an adult living independently, yet he continued to stay with us as he completed his master's degree at the University of North Carolina. I initially intended to go. I returned to the living room, yet something restrained me. Perhaps it was merely an instinctive sensation. I set my coffee aside and ascended the stairs, each step emitting a gentle creak beneath my weight. Nathan's door stood ajar, the gentle blue glow from his computer screen illuminating his features. I was just about to knock when I suddenly stopped, my gaze fixed on Nathan, lying on the bed. His hands danced swiftly, the screen's glow illuminating his eyes with a bright sheen. Initially, I believed he was merely joking. I was completely engrossed in a film or something similar, and as I instinctively tilted my head to view it from another angle, my comprehension fractured. A shiver coursed through me, and my heart momentarily faltered. I came to the understanding that I had witnessed far more than was appropriate. Nathan realized it as well. He leaped out of bed and rushed to press the button to shut off the screen. Yet it was already too late. The opportunity had slipped away. As our gazes locked, I glimpsed the turmoil within him, a swirl of panic, shame, confusion, and an unnamed emotion simmering just beneath the surface. The atmosphere felt dense and oppressive. For what seemed like an eternity, Nathan fumbled with his words. I'm sorry, he murmured, his voice, a fragile whisper laced with urgency. A peculiar warmth enveloped me, and I felt an urge to speak to ease the atmosphere. Yet the words remained lodged in my throat. I turned and exited the room, my mind still grappling with the events that had just unfolded. I descended the stairs, my heart racing intensely, as if I could hear its thundering beat. "What on earth did I just witness?" I murmured, clutching the railing firmly. It seemed to be my sole connection to fill this void. I ought to have simply knocked, disregarding the subtle sound. I had the option to dismiss it then, yet I chose not to. And now there was no turning back. I lingered on the couch in the living room, gripping my cold coffee tightly. Regardless of my efforts to erase it from my thoughts, Nathan's bewildered expression lingered in my mind. We had shared countless experiences over the past 4 years, ever since I entered into marriage with Ben Nathan, and our relationship was quite conventional, courteous, yet lacking in profound connection. He possessed intelligence, yet he was somewhat withdrawn, and I often felt he merely regarded me as his stepmother. Yet this evening a shift occurred. As Nathan descended the stairs, his gaze upon me was nothing short of intense. The silence spoke volumes, and the tension hanging in the air was unmistakable. He averted his gaze as he passed, yet I sensed there was something deeper at play. He was more conscious of my presence than he admitted. I could have said something to ease the tension, perhaps shared a laugh, or offered some reassuring words, but instead I remained silent, fixated on the TV, even though my mind was elsewhere. For the following 3 days, it felt as though everything returned to its usual state. Nathan continued his routine, rising each morning to brew coffee, immersing himself in his laptop, brimming with files, and attending school as he typically did, but I sensed that I occupied his thoughts. There was undeniably a shift in our relationship. That was the moment I began to observe the subtle details. As I stood at the sink scrubbing the dishes, I sensed his gaze on me for a brief moment before he swiftly averted his eyes. As I entered the living room, Nathan would momentarily stiffen before returning to his task. As I crouched to retrieve an item from the cupboard, I noticed him pause and linger a bit closer than he typically would. I continually reassured myself that it was merely a figment of my imagination. One evening, as Nathan and as we sat together watching TV, a realization struck me. Typically, we maintain a certain distance, but that evening, the space between us seemed to shrink. Unbeknownst to me, I became aware of the warmth radiating from him as he adjusted in his seat. As I shifted my hand, it lightly grazed his for a fleeting moment, yet that brief contact was sufficient for me to sense an electric energy coursing through my body. At that instant, we found ourselves completely still. Nathan gazed at me, his expression shifting from one of innocence to uncertainty. I felt as though I was engaged in a struggle within my own mind. I swallowed hard and averted my gaze, pretending the moment had slipped by unnoticed, yet inside I recognized its significance. At that instant, I understood that everything was on the brink of transformation. Once more I persuaded myself that by simply overlooking it, everything would return to the way it was. I reassured myself that it was merely a phase, a misinterpretation on my part. Yet one evening, the truth struck me. I completely botched it. In the quiet of the night, the clock struck 2:17 a.m. As I lay in bed, an odd sense of unease washed over me. No matter how much I shifted and squirmed, I just couldn't find a comfortable position. Thoughts of Nathan kept invading my mind, and I truly wished to avoid him. Last night, the way he looked at me is something I should forget. These emotions shouldn't be haunting me. Yet the more I attempted to banish them from my mind, the more difficult it became. A wave of energy coursed through me as if something profound was stirring to life I truly desired to experience. Freedom. I rose from my slumber and made my way to the kitchen in search of a refreshing glass of water. As I strolled past Nathan's room, I noticed his door was ajar. A gentle glow from his desk lamp poured forth, casting delicate shadows upon the wall. I understood that I ought to persevere and adhere to my routine. Yet when I caught a glimpse inside the room, my heart simply froze. Nathan lay asleep on his side, the sheets draped down, revealing his strong shoulders and the visage of a mature man. The gentle yellow glow from the desk lamp illuminated his skin, giving him an air of tranquility, mixed with a hint of danger. I was aware that I ought to turn my gaze elsewhere, yet I found myself unable to do so. I stood there, my gaze locked on him, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions swirling within me, despite knowing I shouldn't be watching or feeling this way. I found myself unable to stop. Then Nathan began to shift. He shifted his focus, and for an instant our eyes were intertwined. I stood still. The room lay in utter stillness. Not a soul stirred. We simply gazed at one another as if time had come to a standstill. Nathan blinked and slightly tilted his head. His voice was soft and drowsy as he inquired, "What brings you here?" I gulped my breath, hitching in my throat. I could pretend I was merely passing through, but that would be irrelevant. Nathan had already seen through it. He noticed me sitting there, simply observing him, and it dawned on him that there was no rational explanation for it. I had liberated myself from my typical constraints. I parted my lips to speak, yet the words eluded me. Nathan's eyes locked onto mine, lingering in a way that seemed to stretch time itself. He inhaled deeply and stood tall. And as the blanket slipped away, I averted my gaze, attempting to conceal my discomfort, yet that moment had slipped away, and Nathan let out a gentle chuckle, remarking, "There's no need to hurry off like that, my dear." Anxiety surged within me, and I understood it was time to go. I ought to have stopped this before it escalated. Yet, I found myself immobilized as if a part of me was reluctant to turn away. That ended up being my greatest error. I ought to have simply exited that room, shut the door behind me, and acted as if this never took place. Yet I found myself trapped, not out of desire, but out of necessity. Nathan perched on the edge of the bed, his gaze fixed intently on me. His gaze fixed on me. I sensed an intriguing intensity emanating from him in that moment. He had transformed from the timid individual I once knew. A distinct separation existed. He was aware of my presence, observing from the periphery. He understood that I couldn't refute what had just transpired, and that sparked a fresh sense of assurance in him, a daringness I had never witnessed before. "Hey, Nathan," he said slowly, his voice low, as if he were gauging my response. "Are you feeling a little sleepy, perhaps?" My heart raced faster than normal as I made my way to the kitchen for a glass of water. I uttered this softly, longing for my voice to carry more strength. Nathan tilted his head, gazing at me as if he was aware of my deception. "Oh, is that so?" he remarked, a subtle, unsettling grin spreading across his face. Uncertain of what was driving me, I decided to turn away, feeling the need to intervene before the situation escalated. As I extended my hand toward the doorknob, Nathan's voice suddenly broke through from behind me. "Have you considered it?" I simply remained there, motionless. I was already aware of the situation. We both understood the truth of the situation. My breath became labored. I clutched the doorknob firmly, yet I found myself unable to twist it. I ought to have simply opened it and walked away. Yet, I remained there, my hands warm with a blend of guilt and longing. "Nathan." I uttered my voice gravelly. "This is not the way." He completed my sentence. Yet his voice held no uncertainty. I finally faced Nathan, attempting to connect with his gaze. I murmured, uncertain whether I was persuading him or merely seeking to soothe my own nerves. Nathan simply chuckled. "Is that what you desire?" His question dismantled every barrier I had erected. I parted my lips to reply, yet silence enveloped me. I came to understand that I couldn't deceive him. I couldn't overlook the fact that a small part of me was ensnared in this moment. Nathan rose to his feet and approached me, and I discovered myself. I retreated, leaning my back against the door. He remained near, his warmth enveloping me, and I could sense a subtle hint of mint on his breath. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear as he murmured, "You might say no, but deep down you know you won't." I trembled, not due to the chill in the air, but because I realized I had to distance myself from him. I realized it was time to go, yet I remained still, surrendering to the comforting warmth of his breath. An inexplicable attraction enveloped me, and then Nathan's touch ignited something within. It wasn't anything wild, just a soft touch of his fingers on my wrist, but it was sufficient to dismantle any barriers between us. In a heartbeat, everything transformed, and there was no turning back. I can't recall how I exited Nathan's room. In an instant, I found myself suspended between thought and instinct, only to be abruptly transported to my room. The door crashing shut behind me, I rested against it, my heart racing so quickly that I could sense it thumping in my chest. What just occurred? I pressed my hand against my face, struggling to catch my breath. The memory of Nathan's hand on my wrist remained as if it were etched into my skin. It seemed superfluous, yet I remained engaged and did not refuse. I remained awake throughout the night, battling the intrusive thoughts swirling in my mind, yet a part of me yearned to cling to that fleeting moment. The following day I chose to steer clear of Nathan. I rose earlier than normal and didn't linger in the kitchen for him as I typically would. I occupied myself with tidying and arranging my closet, doing anything to distract myself from thoughts of him. As the evening approached, it dawned on me that I couldn't escape him indefinitely. Nathan returned home late from the library, and as he entered the kitchen, I was engrossed in my task. As I washed the dishes, his presence was palpable, even without glancing in his direction. I wished for him to behave as if nothing had occurred, and I secretly hoped he might. As I turned, I found Nathan's gaze fixed on me, unwavering and resolute. The atmosphere between us was dense, akin to a thick mist. "You're dodging me," he remarked. I clutched the washcloth firmly in my hand. "No, I'm simply occupied," I retorted. Nathan offered a faint smile, one that carried a hint of disbelief. In all the chaos, there's always a moment to pause. As I savored a cup of coffee, words seemed to escape me. He was indeed correct, however. I inhaled deeply, attempting to soothe my anxious thoughts. Nathan regarding the events of yesterday. "There's no need for an explanation," he cut in. "I understand." I gazed at him, bewildered. "What do you mean?" He stood by the counter, arms folded, lost in contemplation. "Fear has a firm grip on you." I blinked, filled with fear. Nathan merely inclined his head a fraction. "Not afraid because it occurred, but afraid because you desired it to." A surge of emotions washed over me. I realize I ought to let it go, yet I can no longer deceive myself. The stillness enveloped us, while the unyielding tick-tock of the clock resonated in the charged atmosphere. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the enchantment that was pulling me closer. "Nathan, we can't continue down this path." He smiled, yet a profound depth lingered in his eyes, suggesting a shadow of lost innocence. "You claim it's unachievable, yet you've never demonstrated a desire to change." I remained where I was as he approached, and I ought to have shifted, yet I chose not to. I hesitated yet. "I long to stay, Nathan," I murmured. He lifted his hand, his fingers grazing my arm. A gentle caress that ignited a thrill within me. "You can push me away now," he said, his voice deep and subtly defiant. "Simply provide the cue, and I will cease." I ought to have maintained my distance, yet I chose not to. I allowed him to approach me. As the distance between us diminished, I understood that withdrawing was no longer a possibility. Crossed a line, and before long, Ben would uncover the reality.